We're now live on YouTube, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Jeanette. Please continue, Sergeant Enderby.
Thank you, Chair. You can see from both the screenshots and that footage that this was not a controlled event. There were no COVID regulations being adhered to. None of the guidance appeared to be being followed. Certainly by that point, there was little control whatsoever. It's worth noting that what that appeared to be was a nightclub. There were people dancing, there was music playing, they were crammed together inside the marquee. Nightclubs have been unable to open, to trade, to make money, to operate as a business since March last year. So why the people in charge of this premises felt they would be allowed to do that, I can't think of any reason why they would think in any way possible that Step 2 gave them the green flag to behave or operate their premises in this way. It's worth pointing out that on page 33, one of the screenshots at the top on the right-hand side of the page does appear to demonstrate that the premises knew what they should be doing. Obviously, it will be for the persons from the premises, Mr. Blakey and his son, to explain why they didn't do that. But certainly, there's a list of things. Please bring a face mask. Please always be 6 to a table. They're clear to have an understanding of what they should be doing. And again, without wishing to repeat myself, they spoke to Mr. Davis, who prior to this event told them what they should be doing. They didn't do it. What you have there, we found from the footage, are people mixing outdoors at that time. You were allowed a group of 6 to a table, or 2 families, which could make larger numbers. The photographs in those screenshots and clearly on that video footage shows that people were just mixing willy-nilly with whoever they wanted. There was no staff coming to ask them to sit down. There was no staff intervening, trying to enforce measures on any of the evidence we've got. They had a bar outside. People were queuing up, purchasing alcohol from the bar outside. Again, anybody with the slightest interest, knowledge in the guidance would know that it's table service only. But they allowed persons to queue up, purchase of alcohol, and wander around freely. As you go through these screenshots, comments where people saying what a fantastic party it was. On page 35, the Railway pub, the bottom left-hand side, after the success for the reopening of the pubs, the 17 went off with a bang. Again, that appears to be the premises endorsing what we've seen, not being worried, not being concerned, but thinking that they'd done it right and that it was reasonable to operate their premises like that during this ongoing pandemic. What should also be borne in mind was this was occurring at a time when Boston ranked 9th in the national rankings for coronavirus infection rate per 100,000 people, and was the local area with the highest infection rate in Lincolnshire, with 79.8% per 100,000 infections from the 14th to the 16th of April, where the English average at that point was 28.4. So we weren't out of this. We're not out of it yet. There are thousands of businesses across the whole county who are doing what is expected of them. Some of them haven't opened trading full hours because they don't feel they can do because of the risk of something like this happening. For not to put, or on the evidence we have before us, to not put anything in place, not put any control measures in place, not do anything, is extremely concerning. Even if you disregard COVID, to have an event like this at a public house, where again there appears to be no thought put into it, would concern me, whether it's 2 years ago or hopefully 18 months forward, when we may be fully through this and everyone can meet up properly again. to have a licensed premises that is operating where there is no thought given to what occurs at that licensed premises is not how we expect businesses to operate. We expect professionalism, and we expect a degree of control over the premises that this business certainly hasn't demonstrated. Because of what we've seen, because of the video evidence, which seems to show a rave occurring in the beer garden, which is clearly the reason all the noise was heard so far away, because we believe there have been clear breaches of coronavirus regulations, the undermining of the licensing objectives, and the total lack of management or control of the venue by those responsible for it. A meeting was arranged to see if they could offer any sort of explanation for what had taken place over the weekend. That meeting took place on Wednesday, the 21st of April. I myself was present. The licensing officer, Anna, was there, and Mr. Davis from the Environmental Health attended. Went out the premises. We met the premises licence holder, Mr. Blakey, and his son, the designated premises supervisor, Casey Blakey. I started the meeting by asking how they thought the opening weekend had gone. They both stated that apart from a few noise complaints, they thought it had been successful. I hadn't mentioned the amount of complaints we had at that point. I hadn't said that we'd got video footage and the screenshots. After a few minutes of conversation with them, it became obvious that neither of them was going to mention the overcrowding, the dancing, the lack of social distancing that had occurred. So I chose to ask them directly for an explanation, and I showed them the footage that we'd been sent. I showed them the footage on my computer, and they agreed that it had been filmed in the marquee at the rear of the pub. So the footage you've seen is at the Railway Inn. It did happen at that weekend. They were unable to offer an explanation as to why things had got so out of control. I asked to see a copy of their COVID risk assessment. As any premises open and trading has to have completed a COVID risk assessment in relation to their business to demonstrate how they will protect both staff and members of the public using the venue. It's also a legal requirement that they demonstrate they've taken all reasonable steps to ensure that COVID legislation and guidance has been adhered to and implemented. Indeed, it gives them a defence of due diligence. If something like this happens and they have put all those steps in place, they can show that it was beyond their control or that they'd taken all reasonable steps to prevent something like this happening. Unfortunately, they stated they hadn't completed a risk assessment of any type. They had nothing they could show me whatsoever. Well, there was some signage displayed on the exterior of the pub in relation to social distancing and similar measures. It was obvious that no real attempt had been made to implement that, to make sure the necessary safety measures are in place. Both the licence holder and the designated premises supervisor demonstrated a total lack of understanding of what was expected of them when running a licensed premises. And they clearly demonstrated a total lack of control over their licensed premises. It's obvious that no real attempts have been made to ensure social distancing or that people remain seated once in the garden area of the premises. In fact, that they admitted that they were allowing customers to queue and purchase alcohol from an outside bar area. I asked if they had been present over the weekend at the time of the problems being reported on the Saturday. They stated they had been. I asked who had actually been in overall control, because I don't think it's unreasonable to think if they were both there, you would expect either the licence holder or the designated premises supervisor, the two people who have responsibility within the Licensing Act, to have a level of control. Dean Blakey stated that he wasn't really in charge, as he kept having to pop out to do various things to get more ice and drinks, etc. While Casey Blakey stated it was his birthday, so he was there, but he wasn't acting in the capacity of designated premises supervisor. They were unable to name any person who was actually in control of the venue, who was in overall control while all this was going on. During that meeting, I brought along the drugs itemiser, which the committee will be aware is a machine which we swab licensed premises with to get readings in relation to drug use on the premises. We tested the gents' toilet, and we got high readings for cocaine, 4.51 and 4.17 in the areas tested, with the ladies' toilets also testing positive for cocaine at 3.50 and 2.14, again in the areas tested, which was the cubicles and the sink area. To give some sort of context to these results, those levels in the gents' toilets, the machine set at 0, it's calibrated at 0, and then that's how you'd expect most places to be should you swab them, and then obviously the results go up as you get it higher. These are the sort of readings that we would find pre-pandemic in a nightclub where you've got numerous amounts of people using it, hundreds, 200, maybe thousands. A big nightclub like Home Nightclub in Lincoln, where you've got a high footfall. Unfortunately, we accept that drugs are used recreationally in the nighttime economy, but we expect the premises to do something to control that, or at least mitigate that drug use. Also of concern was the fact that drugs residue does degrade over time. This premises hadn't been open, hadn't allowed members of the public into those toilets since the 5th of November, when that first initial lockdown occurred. The business was closed apart from takeaway, followed by the longer lockdown on the 6th of January until the 12th of April. So had the toilets been tested prior to reopening, we would have expected to find extremely small amounts of any drug use. All we can think of is the fact that since this premises reopened on the 12th of April, to our visit 10 days later, the readings indicate that there's been sustained and regular drug use by customers at that premises. Again, you would expect a level of control to be in place in any licensed premises at any time, but certainly again, during a COVID pandemic, it's a lot more controlled environment. You have less customers, you can see where they're going, you can see what they're doing, and the toilets are supposed to be cleaned regularly because of COVID. So you would expect that some of these traces of illegal substances would be cleaned away, which clearly they hadn't been, which raises two concerns: is how good the measures they had in place in relation to cleaning, in relation to the COVID guidance, and also in relation to people regularly using the premises for drugs. And as I've said, I fully accept that the problem in any licensed premises is people will use drugs. That is always a problem, but what we expect the premises to do is implement something that makes it harder for them to use those drugs, makes it easier to identify the people using those drugs. This premises hasn't got a drugs policy and didn't appear to have anything implemented, any training in place whatsoever, which could be used by them or the staff to prevent people taking drugs on licensed premises. It's evidence from the social media posts after the event and from the meeting with myself that neither the premises licence holder or designated premises supervisor really saw any issue in the way they managed their premises over the weekend in question. There were no calls to the police during that weekend asking for assistance, which we have had. We've had premises that have opened, they've had things in place, and then things have got out of control. So they've called either the police or the council to ask for assistance, saying, what do we do? How do we get back on control of this? There were no calls expected from that premises asking for that because the numbers were greater than expected or things got out of hand. No contact was made. These individuals have knowingly profited from a deliberate unsafe event, which they could have stopped at any time. They could have pulled the plug on that. They could have calmed it down. What we saw happening was within their control. It wasn't something that was out of their control. We have numerous large licensed premises with very large beer gardens that are full with people drinking, and those premises manage to adhere to COVID regulations because they have them and they're enforcing them and they're managing their premises. I'm at a loss really to come up with any reasonable explanation for why this was allowed to happen at this pub, other than a total lack of care and responsibility. As I said, Nick Davies spoke to them prior to the event advising them. The social media post indicates that they knew what they were supposed to do, but they appear to just have failed to do it. So I cannot accept that all the evidence we've seen so far is because of circumstances beyond their control, a mistake or things spiraling out of control. No evidence exists for that explanation. All the evidence points to a lack of care, a lack of due diligence or professionalism on behalf of the persons who are tasked with running this licensed premises. Because of the total lack of evidence that could show this venue doing anything to promote the licensing objectives or curb the spread of the virus during this ongoing pandemic, the decision was made to take the premises straight to a licence review hearing. A stepped approach, liaising and advising the venue prior to the event had failed. So the right decision, I believe, was to go to a review hearing at that point. I explained this to both the licence holder and the designated premises supervisor face to face at the end of that meeting, that I considered what had occurred to be so serious that we would be submitting evidence for a review hearing. Now, Lincolnshire Police conduct intervention at licensed premises across the whole county. We submit paperwork for numerous review hearings for a host of issues. What I would normally expect from a premises facing an upcoming review hearing is they attempt to put their house in order. They resolve the issues that were causing the concerns. They come to the hearing and they demonstrate that what happened was a one-off, that things had changed. I would also expect that during the run-up to the hearing, they would do everything in their control to show how well the venue can be run, how well they can promote the licensing objectives, that there is a steady hand on the tiller, that they do know what they're doing. Unfortunately, with the railway, this doesn't seem to be the case. You have PCSO Smith's statement in your evidence bundle. Stated on Monday the 17th of May, approximately 17:11 hours, was on duty with PCSO Williams en route to a traffic-related incident. They were passing the Railway Public House on London Road, Boston. A member of the public had flagged them down. There was a male collapsed on the pavement outside the pub. They exited the vehicle and gone to assist the male on the floor who apparently collapsed and appeared to be having a seizure of some kind. They noticed the male had a white substance around the bottom of his nose and also coming from inside his nose, which looked like powder. There's also another male slouched up the fence near to the male on the floor. The male appeared to be intoxicated and was unable to stand up without supporting himself and was incoherent when they attempted to converse with him. They asked the male if the male on the floor had any medical issues. However, he couldn't comprehend anything he was saying and gave no response. Medical attention was given. The male was placed in the recovery position and an ambulance was called for. By this time, 3 males from the beer garden of the Railway Public House came to the boundary fence of the pub, approximately 1 metre from where the PCSO was stood, and asked what was going on. I asked them if they knew either of the 2 males. One of the males said they knew them both. They were from a local football club and they had been inside the Railway pub with them a short while ago. They said the male on the floor had taken what they believed was cocaine. However, they now believed it to be a bad batch of cocaine mixed with ketamine. Whilst talking to the males at the pub, the male who had previously conscious slumped, so they now have 2 unconscious males lying on the pavement. Another ambulance was called. By this time, there were possibly 4 males at the pub in a fence, one with a beer in his hand laughing. PCSO Williams myself heard one of them say they'd taken the same drug and they were fine. I asked if anyone else had taken it due to the seemingly serious condition of the 2 males unconscious on the floor. One of them said they hadn't, the other didn't answer. They appeared a little intoxicated. I told them they needed checking out as soon as possible at the hospital, as it appears their friends on the floor had overdosed. 3 males from the beer garden came to sit and attempt to converse with the 2 unconscious males as they knew them. A couple of them appeared intoxicated. She then states at no point can myself or PCSO Williams call any staff member from the Railway Public House coming to assist us or see what was going on with the commotion. She states it would have been obvious to staff at the premises that there was some kind of issue due to 2 police cars and ambulances parked on the curtilage of the premises. So you have 2 males, and I accept we have only the word of the other persons in the garden that the drugs that had caused these two males to lapse into unconsciousness had been taken within the licensed premises, either the beer garden or in the premises. However, what it also demonstrates is the fact that in the beer garden, you've got people wandering around, drinks in the hand, wandering over, and no control by the staff. The staff appear to be unaware that anything is taking place. Again, you would expect that if you're controlling a premises, if people have to sit in a certain way, whether indoors or outdoors, that you have staff making regular checks, going around, ensuring that people are adhering to what they should be adhering to. That they're not wandering around with glasses in the hand, they're not wandering around without masks on, etc. This appears to indicate that none of that was taking place, and it also has worrying concerns in relation to continued drug use of the premises. It doesn't appear that any steps have been taken following that initial meeting we had with them, where we showed them the drugs readings. We told them that drugs have been used at the premises. It doesn't appear that anything had taken place to try and target or address the recreational drug use on the licensed premises. I've got a final piece of footage that I wish to show the committee now. If we can go back into private session, Chair, please.
Thank you, Sergeant Enderby. Jeanette, could we stop the YouTube broadcast, please?
Yes, Chairman, one moment.